I am a happy man. I am so relieved. I wrote a new column for Fox News, my regular Thursday column that begins. I'm just so relieved. I slept 10 hours last night, and I get up very early for this program to do show prep. But I just had run out of gas after the last 2 months, and especially the last 2 days. And after yesterday, some show prep, listening to a bunch of podcasts, I settled down. I just said, "That's it. I'm done. I'm going to make a final post on X and then go to sleep." And I did. And this morning got up early. First, the news: Dave McCormick has won that Senate seat, and Bob Casey should concede. It is not honorable for the current senator of Pennsylvania to hold out hope, but there is no hope. I am not optimistic about Captain Brown in Nevada. It's going to be a heartbreaker. He's ahead right now, but that which will be delivered in the mail would suggest to me he can't hold on to that narrow lead. Kari Lake, I just do not know. Too much of the vote is out. I do not know why Arizona is broken. They have a Democratic governor and a Democratic attorney general. Maybe that's why it's broken, like New York and California, but it's broken. I just do not know, but don't give up on Kari Lake. So we're going to have at least 53 Republican senators, and we're going to probably hold on to the House. 18 undecided seats. Republicans feel pretty good about retaining their majority. Talked to a bunch of people. I am hopeful for Ken Calvert, Juan Ciscomani, Michelle Steele, Scott Baugh. Young Kim's been declared the winner. I just don't know, and so I'm not going to guarantee it, but it feels like they will have a lot to move out on. Now, I have been enjoying myself thinking about President-elect Trump presiding over the semi-quincentennial of the United States. Our 250th birthday is on July 4th, 2026. But it actually gets underway, the preliminaries, in April of this coming year. That's the 250th anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord, which are genuinely agreed upon as the beginning of the American Revolution. So one of the things he needs, I hope his first executive order is to stand up the Semi-Quincentennial Commission. He had a 1776 commission. We can gather up those people, but maybe Victor Davis Hanson is its chairman to celebrate the American Republic in its strength and its durability. And I've been amused thinking about the fact that President-elect Trump is going to preside over the Los Angeles Olympiad in 2028. And that my old friends at NBC, which carries the Olympics, and they have the contract, I hope he just goes and settles into the box, the presidential box. Rates whoever's in charge of the world at that time, welcomes them, gives them big hugs, watch our athletes. Going to be Donald Trump in that box, J.D. Vance next to him. Now, I want to begin by saying a day's reflection and consumption of good media. And by good media, I mean not people that I agree with, but serious, well-educated people who are concerned with facts. That would be the gang at the Commentary podcast, Mary Catherine Ham and Vic Mattis at Getting Hammered. That would be everyone at National Review, and they do a podcast, the editors. It would be Megyn Kelly. It would be Dan Senor at Call Me Back. It would be Dwayne's World. I listen to a group podcast, and I'm really looking forward this morning to Ruthless podcast, because the fellas are pros, and they're going to tell me what worked and why it worked so well and everything about it. I've saved that for this morning's trundle to the program. But I want you to focus for a minute. When tsunamis come in, they destroy a lot. The red tsunami, it wasn't a red wave, it was a red tsunami. Donald Trump won the first popular vote victory since George W. Bush won in 2004. And popular vote doesn't matter. The constitutional majority is in the Electoral College, and he's up to 312, I think. It's a wipeout. And the Republicans took the Senate. I think they're going to hold the House, and I don't know down tickets yet. We don't have enough of the races counted in state houses and all that kind of thing. But I know what I heard in the month leading up to the election, which was a concerted effort by legacy media. And I'm not talking about the hard left over at MSNBC. I don't watch that. I pay attention to legacy media and the It's not intentional misleading of the American people. It was negligent. It was negligent, what they did and what they reported, collectively. But there were some truly brazen attempts to brainwash you. Donald Trump did not threaten Liz Cheney with a firing squad. Donald Trump did not say he was going to be a dictator. Donald Trump did not make the tasteless joke about Puerto Rico. Oprah Winfrey, Rachel Maddow, and others who told you it would be the last time you would ever vote unless Kamala Harris won, they got way, way over their skis. I could go on. The whole, he's a fascist, it's the end of the rule of law. It's all silly, and I don't take it seriously. But I've known Michael Beschloss a long time, and when I heard on the commentary podcast, he said, no more history. History will be outlawed. He could not have said that. And then I realized the collective groupthink on the left has grown so extreme. They are trapped in a blue bubble, and they have suffocated. Their reason has suffocated. But some people, pollsters, they've got to stop. They were so wrong. I don't want you to think they almost got it right. They were very, very wrong. And I don't want to name call Ann Seltzer. She had a great reputation that is now, unfortunately, dented. Donald Trump crushed it in Iowa. She had Kamala Harris carrying Iowa by 4, which fueled part of this closing game speculation frenzy. We were gaslit. The whole country was gaslit. And if you listen to one thing, listen to Getting Hammered with Mary Catherine Ham and Vic Mattis. They recorded it yesterday afternoon. I listened to it yesterday afternoon late because I went to sleep at like 7 o'clock, 7:30. Listen to them review the various ways in which we were gaslit. And don't be angry. Just walk away. Do not put up with it anymore. Leave. Do not watch. The trauma experienced by people who've lived in the alternative reality of the left is real, and it leads them to say, even extraordinarily talented, smart people, like John Dickerson was a weekly guest on this show for a long time. He was on Stephen Colbert last night, and he said this, cut number 1. Really respect John Dickerson. He is an able and calm man. The restraints on the executive branch placed there by Article 1 and Article 3 have not been loosed. All right? That's just not true. The new president would not want to break them anyway. He is often passionate, Donald Trump. He is often shocking. He can say genuinely surprising, and some people will be outraged. I'm never outraged by anything elected officials say, because I live in a free country, and I'll respond if I don't agree with them. And as that happens, as I have done in the first Trump term, I will do in the second Trump term. Call them on that and say that's not correct. But the cataclysmic rhetoric is so reckless. Oprah, you're along with Rush Limbaugh, the most successful communicator of the 20th century, and still widely understood to be talented beyond belief. Don't tell people it's the last time they're going to vote. John Dickerson, don't tell people the restraints are off. It's not true. The Constitution is very, very, very strong. And the Supreme Court is very, very, very willing to rebuke President Trump, President Biden, President Trump 2.0. The Constitution is very strong. Stand up on this, the opening of our 250th anniversary as a country. Stand up for freedom and for liberty and for the Constitution, and stop with the panic mongering. It does not befit a free press to engage in such ludicrous, cataclysmic rhetoric. I am here to shake the left hand and give them some help, because they're broken. They are very broken. Legacy media is broken. The left is broken. And I am here actually to provide some help. One of my dearest friends is Bill. Professor Bill Lebdell used to teach at UCI. He's retired now from teaching. He was a journalist for many years, the Los Angeles Times columnist for many years. I haven't talked to him in a long time. But when he taught at UCI, He taught journalism, and he would invite me to give one lecture a year, and I would always oblige him. And there was a couple hundred students in a big auditorium, and I would begin with a list of questions. How many of you are pro-choice? Okay, how many of you are pro-life? Would the pro-life people move over here to the right? Would the pro-left people? And I would shuffle the students. How many of you own a gun? How many of you, I'd run down all the litmus test issues. How many of you voted for George W. Bush? How many of you voted for Al Gore? And I would sort the class, and I keep sorting the class until, as I looked at it, the left side of the room were by far the most left-wing students, and the right side of the room was by far the most conservative students. There were very few radicals in the first decade of the second millennium, third millennium. And then I would say, okay, now let's imagine that we produce a newspaper, because it was newspapers in those days and not platforms. Let's suppose that we produce a newspaper that is only staffed by those of you, and I would point to the slice of the room that was on the far left. We produce two newspapers. One newspaper is only going to be written, reported, edited, and published with opinion pieces by, and I'd point to there are 200 students, the 20 on the farthest left. And then we're going to do same deal. You on the right side of the room, you're going to do a newspaper. And we're going to do the same story assignments every day. Cover this, cover that, cover this. Do you think those newspapers will be alike? And drove home to them that the newsroom makeup drives the news. And I want to quote Dan Rather, I believe it's Dan Rather, as told to me by the late Terry Eastland, my dear friend who died last year. Longtime publisher of the Weekly Standard, longtime publisher of American Spectator, just a wonderful man. Ed Mises, Director of Public Affairs at the Department of Justice in the Reagan administration, in a Bible study with me for years. He used to quote Dan Rather, so that's what my quote comes from. News is where you look. News is where you look. If you produce that newspaper from the left group, the people who are all in agreement about the issue, it will be completely different from the newspaper you produce from the right group. People in agreement on all the issues. That's like the Catholic exponent of my youth, the diocesan newspaper of Youngstown, Warren. And that would be a completely different newspaper, even if they were assigned to cover the same thing. What has happened in legacy media is actually they have sorted themselves into all left-wingers. And I do not know how to fix that. I have given up trying. I tried with NBC. I tried with the Washington Post. I have been willing to appear on any show in legacy media for as long as I've been in this business. I worked for PBS, for goodness sake, for 10 years, co-hosting the nightly news in public affairs show in Los Angeles on KCET with two lefties. And they're dear friends, Pat Morrison, Kerman Maddox, and Ruben Martinez. 2 out of 3 of them would be with me whenever I was on. And so I do not mind the battle. The battle of ideas is good. But effectively now, news is being produced without even one Hugh Hewitt in the room. Or the sprinkling of conservatives is enough to satisfy and solve the conscience of those who are in charge of putting out the product. And it ought not to, because it's a terrible imbalance. It's a 95 to 5, 99 to 1% imbalance. And the 1% is afraid, and the young people don't want to speak up because they don't want to get fired and they don't want to get hassled. So broken legacy media gaslit the country, but the country rose up and said, no, we don't believe you. We reject you. We want Donald Trump back. He's not a dictator. He ought not to have been prosecuted. All of this nonsense ought to stop. We are Americans. Let's get together and focus on the fact that there are people who want to kill us, including China, Russia, and Iran, and our Israeli allies are under assault, and our Arab allies abandoned. And that's what they did, and I am so glad that they did. I am so relieved, as my Fox News column today suggests. I'm joined by Salena Zito, prophetess. I'm no longer going to call her a journalist. She's a prophetess. Prophetess Salena, from the book of Judges of Pittsburgh. Salena Zito joins me. Good morning, Salena. You were right again. How are you, prophetess?
morning, you. Good morning, sunshine. How are you?
I'm so relieved the Yinzers came through. The Steelers fans saved us, Salena. The Steelers fan.
They did. You can no more dumping on my
I'm going to
people.
dump on the Steelers fans, but they
No more
saved us.
dumping on my people.
I got to ask you, first question. Is there any way Dave McCormick loses this?
No.
Okay.
No.
Explain that to people.
There's anything that's left is certainly more votes for him than not. There's just a handful out here and there of counties that had some problems on election night, mostly with machines that either went wonky or people who didn't know how to work the machine. And so, I'm not quite sure why Casey has not conceded, but that's his decision, I guess. But
it's
it should be
speculation
called
time.
out. Yeah.
Nick, I trust you, Salena, because you're always right about, especially Pennsylvania. But now, naked speculation. Had Vice President Harris selected Governor Shapiro as her running mate, at least we know the vice presidential debate would not have been a disaster for the Democrats as it was, because Josh Shapiro is very smart, very deft, and would have been, sort of a collision of giants. Do you think they would have won Pennsylvania if Josh Shapiro had been on the ticket?
So people have asked me that all the way leading up to this, and even asked me that, when it was being speculated if he should or would do it, including you. I never thought it was a good fit for Shapiro, and part of the reason why I didn't think it would be a good fit for Shapiro was because I thought it would put him on a losing ticket, and meaning he couldn't do enough to bring her across the finish line, not because he's not a talented political athlete. He is. He's very, very talented. But because I don't think they would have let him be himself. I think they would have demanded that he not talk to the press. Well, Josh is never going to do that. He talks to everybody. And he's a sitting governor. And while I know Walz is also a sitting governor, Shapiro's very, very hands-on. And he would have not been able to not be able to communicate with the press.
I think he is now the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party in 2028. And it's not my party. I don't know. I know there are others who want to run against whoever is our nominee, likely J.D. Vance or somebody else that we don't know, because it's a long time from now. It's a long time from now. But I believe he is their presumptive nominee because they're going to have to win the blue wall back, and they need a young man or a young woman, and they need a smart person, and he has got serious political chops. Let me ask you about down ticket Pennsylvania. I have not yet seen a serious assessment of state houses and state legislatures and everything else that happened in the red wave. What happened in Pennsylvania?
Statewide, row offices gone, all Republican. Not quite sure yet if the Republicans have won back the state house. Because there's a couple, like I said, there's a couple small counties that might make that difference. And two members of Congress lost, and meaning Democrats, and one held on, Scott Perry, a Republican that they expected to lose. I want to. You said something about Shapiro, a presumptive nominee. I believe that I believe that to be true. And it's the smartest thing the Democrats can do. However, that based on all of the reaction to this loss, they have not understand why they lost. They do not understand that you don't go further left. They do not understand that their issues were all gone, wrong. And which makes me think, well, they would not be smart enough to take Josh Shapiro.
Well, Salena, I agree with you. They do not understand why they lost. They're in shock, and I understand that. That's why I'm not trying to own the libs. That's up to Ruthless Podcast to do. I am not interested in owning the libs. I am interested in telling the truth, and the truth is they're in shock. They don't know what they missed because they only talk to each other. And so they're talking to each other now, and now they're shooting at each other metaphorically. And thank God it's only metaphorically. But Team Obama is shooting at Team Biden, and Team Harris is ducking. It's really a kind of a knife fight on the Democratic side right now.
It really is. And, and I went on this show. You kept asking me every week, well, how's the Harris team doing? And I kept saying, it's a terrible campaign. They're running the worst campaign I've ever seen. He did events where the people were not allowed to spontaneously go, or at least sign up to go a few days ahead of time. It was invite only. The events that they picked to do made absolutely no sense. And that Pensie's thing left a mark. When she went to that spice place in the middle of Pittsburgh's historic strip district that has hundreds of small businesses that are not corporations, and decided to go to the only corporate place there, and this guy was just, he hated everybody and would put that out on social media. He was a known person that didn't even want Republicans to come into his store. Like, everything was off. Everything was wrong.
Let me close this way, Salena. Has anyone invited you to be on a Sunday show this week?
They're never going to invite me. By the way, can I just say that I got every state right? Can I just say that?
This is what I do not understand. They don't want to change. They do not want to change. And so they will be ruined. They will be absolutely abandoned because they will not change. What do you think there's anyone anywhere in legacy media that recognizes the massive nature of their fail and gaslighting and has resolved to change?
No, this is what's going to cause them to completely collapse. There is not one count. There's only one state I did not go to. I wrote in my final story last week. I wrote not only that Trump would win Pennsylvania, but I also said Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. No, it was Nevada. I didn't say because I didn't go to Nevada.
What's interesting to me is that they are not interested in who was right. They are not interested in the truth. And that is what the problem of legacy media is. They are not interested in the truth. Salena Zito, you have been my prophetess. I got you up early this morning because I want to know about McCormick, and I appreciate it. Follow her on X at Zito Salena. Go to our website, salenazito.com, and wait for her book because it's going to be a wild one. Thank you, Salena.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Joined now by phone by Dr. Michael Oren. We got him by picture. Dr. Oren is the former ambassador from Israel to the United States. And I posted last night the most succinct summary of Iran's view of the world post the tsunami that hit the United States elections on Tuesday. But I'd like him to update us. Dr. Oren, we've sent more F-15Es, we've sent B-52s, we've sent ships, but I don't think we're going to deter Iran. Are we going to deter Iran in concert with Israel from attacking you again?
Listen, there's a lot of things going on that we don't know about. A lot of conversations between the prime minister and the president-elect. We also don't know what Joe Biden we have today. Is it the Joe Biden of November 1st or the Joe Biden of November 6th? We don't know. All we know is that these planes have been sent to the Middle East. And these planes have one purpose and one purpose only, and that's offensive. A B-52 carries a 30,000 pound, strategic bunker buster bomb that can break through any Iranian facility. It bombs from 50,000 feet. Iran has nothing that can touch it. Iran doesn't even have an air force. And we've now seen that how Israel has eliminated Iran's air defenses, the Russian air defenses. So there's a message being given. My fear is, you put a pistol on the table and you don't use the pistol, that projects weakness and not strength. So I hope that the intention here is actually to use these planes should the opportunity arrive.
No, I don't believe that Joe Biden would do anything just for history's purposes. But if he did take out Iran's nuclear program, it would be a good coda on a failed presidency. And I don't know how anyone concludes it's other than a failed presidency, Dr. Oren. However, walk us through what's going on in the Netanyahu government, please, because we had this thing going on in the United States, and people may not have noticed the upheaval in Israel.
Yeah, and maybe the timing wasn't uncoincidental also, Hugh. The Prime Minister took the opportunity of the U.S. elections to fire our Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant. Now, I know Yoav very well. We sat in Knesset together. He's a strong-minded, strong-willed man, a great hero, a former commando, and a commander of the commandos, an honest guy. And he has positions, and his positions did not dovetail with those of the Prime Minister or of the government, and he made no attempt to dissemble those positions. And so it was an untenable situation from a political standpoint, perhaps even a strategic standpoint. That's without any consideration of the merit or lack of merit of any of Yoav's actual positions. So it was important that I think the prime minister took on a defense minister who agreed with his positions and the government's positions. Many Israelis were deeply upset about this, including my own family. I can't say, that I was unconcerned about it, only because I care about Israel passionately at the height of a war for our national survival, and I have great regard for Yoav Gallant. But I also understand the political needs for this. He's been replaced by a gentleman who has no real much military experience, no strategic experience, and I think the understanding here is that Prime Minister Netanyahu will also act as defense minister as this war continues.
Well, that's what Churchill did during the war. He said, "I'm going to run the war." Uh, uh, Ambassador Oren, I was with an old friend of yours, maybe two, yesterday at lunch, and I made a prediction about another country's politics, which is really stupid to do. But I made the prediction that the prime minister is going to serve out this government's full tenure. The coalition will stand, and he won't run for reelection, and that is the only way out because he can't win a second go around. What do you think? Do you think that's likely? He'll just serve out this term and then we'll step aside?
You hear that noise in the background? That's rockets going off. That's the alarm of rockets going off. We had rockets here yesterday and the day before.
Oh, dear.
So here they are coming in again. No, I only take issue with one thing. I'm not sure he can't win again. I'm not sure. His popularity is very, very high now. Once again, if he could weather an investigation into the events of October 7th, he would be a very strong candidate once again. I don't know whether he'd want to do that, whether he'd want to cut a deal with the state prosecutor's office that would end these trials against him. He may take that option, but absent a deal with the prosecutor, I think he will seek another term.
Well, does your president have any role to play in being an intermediary between the prosecutors and the prime minister here?
Not formally, but I would imagine, yes, he did. And his relationships with Netanyahu are quite good.
That's what I thought. Now, when does the withdrawal from most of Lebanon begin, in your view? We have like a minute and a half. I'm just trying to get to the end game here. Hamas is defeated in strategic and tactical terms. The hostages have to be gotten, but you don't want to stay in Lebanon much beyond a demilitarized zone, do you?
Well, there's a difference of opinion. Depends what you're asking here. Some people say that we've already accomplished a tremendous amount in Lebanon, that we've driven Hezbollah beyond the Litani River in accordance with UN Resolution 1701, that all Israel really needs is permission to intercede in Lebanon should Hezbollah try to reinstate itself in southern Lebanon in any way. And that seems to be a sticking point for the negotiations. But I think Israel is going to stand firm on that demand. How else can we assure 100,000 Israelis that can go back to their homes? We can't do that. But there's another school that says, no, we're going, and we got to keep going. And that Hezbollah will keep us under, keep the sword of Damocles of hundreds of thousands of Hezbollah rockets and drones and missiles over our heads unless we deal Hezbollah the equivalent of a knockout blow. And that may come in accordance with the knockout blow to Iran as well. So we have to see which of these two schools prevail.
We wait on Iron Beam. That's what Israel needs, and I hope they get it soon. Dr. Michael Oren, former ambassador to the United States from Israel, thank you. Be safe. Get to the shelter if the sirens are going off. I appreciate the time with you. Good morning to you. I got 10 hours of sleep last night. I don't know if Noah Rothman, senior writer for the National Review, did. Noah, are you caught up on your winks?
A little. We were in bed by 9 last night, which was good. But, up at 6 because there's so much to talk about.
I have to get up at 4:30, and not surprisingly, I got to bed at like 7:30 last night. Noah, I agree completely with your new essay, Media Bias is a Weak Force. I don't want to debate that. It doesn't move election. Look at Tuesday. The proof is in the pudding. The media was as biased as I've ever seen it, as wrong as I've ever seen it. The polls were wrong. It didn't change the upheaval. However, I want to ask you to follow up and to consider and reflect on. I'll be interested to read. I think media bias is an extremely corrosive force on the body politic, on all of our institutions, because nobody trusts anybody because of the media bias. What do you think of that proposition?
I think it's 100% right, but it's a different argument, a matter of propriety. Not we're on the exact same page. I started my career writing opinion as a right-wing media critic. I know the contours of that job, and I'm completely on your side on that sense. And this is not a debate over the internal fracas within the press over subjective moral clarity, quote unquote, or the virtues of objectivity and attainable, whether that's attainable or aspirational. That's all outside this argument. This argument is very practical. And it's not just that media bias is a neutral force, a passive force, something that is annoying to the right and satisfying and enlivening to the left, but otherwise doesn't have a lot of implications. I'm saying it had negative implications for democratic prospects here. I'm saying it did active harm to the objectives that media bias was set out to achieve. It did not neutrally have zero effect on the electorate and not influence right-wing voters and centrist voters to vote in Donald Trump's direction. I think it actively harmed those prospects, which is part of the reason why it's not just a weak force, but when it has, like gravity, when it has a certain amount of mass to it, it can affect changes in the physical world that are hard to predict and hard to control. And the
your last line,
press
media bias is an active,
knowing to control them.
Yeah, your last line is that media bias is an act of self-harm, and that means the legacy media is hurting itself. I agree with that. I have two go-to old sayings, Noah. One is an Irish saying: if everybody says you're drunk, you'd better sit down. And that means if you're the only person standing over there holding on to an opinion, you'd better check yourself. The second, I don't know where it comes from, but I love it, is trust is earned in ounces and lost in pounds. And I believe legacy media has lost pounds and pounds of trust. Question for you. You're a young guy, and I'm an older guy. How does legacy media repair itself? What in the world do they do?
That's a very good question. So we've done this before, right? This is all deja vu. After 2016, we had this, within the press, we had this big come to terms moment where media said, we don't understand this country, so we have to, and it was kind of a disingenuous effort, but it was nevertheless engaged in, where they parachuted reporters into middle America and parked in diners and did their best to expose themselves to the country they no longer understood. And this was subject to withering mockery from center left and far left activists who resented the effort, who didn't want the press to expand out and drop the insularity that had so cosseted it from the experience of most Americans. But they understand, if that is the model and they understand how to do it, they could reapply it. The problem was they never engaged in this effort genuinely in the first place. It wasn't a sincere attempt to repair its biases. It was a sincere attempt to expand its value as a product to a consumer base that is no longer consuming the product. And after 2020, they thought that they had done the work, and that as a box checking exercise, it was over. And it wasn't necessary to continue this project because the American people had come to their senses and come back into the fold. And then those who were not within this intellectual, ideological milieu no longer needed to be catered to. And so they lost sight of this project. If they were to re-engage in that very same thing again, I don't think it would be successful, because they've demonstrated to the public they have no actual interest in repairing the priors that lead it to the conclusions that they drew in this race, and that they have to intervene in political events and shape outcomes. That's the whole point of this thing, right? That is where the loss of trust comes from. The press thinks that it has to shape political outcomes rather than observe them empirically and translate them to their readers. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
You drop the idea that you can influence events, or that you even have license to influence events, much less you're effective at it, then the problem goes away, and it goes away pretty quickly. But that's a real paradigm shift, and I think there'll be a lot of resistance to it.
In 2016, then head of NBC News, Andy Lack, came to me in sort of a extension of the parachute experiment. Said, please come join NBC News. We'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this. It doesn't work. And I never speak ill of former colleagues. I'm not going to go into why it doesn't work. I just think they've got to do so much more than tokenism with conservatives.
Well, we were part of that same project, and it was translated to me third hand. So, take it for whatever it's worth. But the idea was that NBC would establish a stable of conservatives who were Trump skeptical, but nevertheless had their finger on the pulse of the right. So when the Trump era ended, they would have a lock on that outlook because it would be ascendant. It turns out there was never a post-Trump moment. There probably never will be a post-Trump moment. But the motives there were commercial. They weren't necessarily civic.
Yes.
It was about trying to corner a market, which is very different from the sort of high-minded ideals that the repertorial class is supposed to hold, which are to advance a civilizational project, the transmission of and creation of and promotion of information, new knowledge, increase the sum of human knowledge, which is very different from influencing political events. If your goal is to influence political events, transmitting knowledge isn't necessarily in your objectives. Maybe some knowledge is undesirable. Maybe you don't want to translate that. And that's where the problem was for the press here entirely. Let's just take the border issue. Border crisis was a major problem for most Americans. It was like the number 2 issue in salience for most Americans. And it just didn't get the coverage that would reflect the level of interest in that subject. Why? Because Democrats understood, not whether that was implicit or explicit, understood that giving this too much oxygen wouldn't advance Democratic prospects. So they didn't transmit knowledge. They suppressed knowledge, which is an abdication of the journalistic objective, the journalistic responsibilities. But it satisfies the political goal. You got to drop the political goal. Just drop it.
Yeah.
At which point,
unless you are in my business. My business and your business is opinion. I'm in the business of defending the Constitution and finding people who agree with me that the Constitution deserves defense as amended. I want to ask you very quickly before we run out of time, Noah. Senator Thune's coming up, GOP whip. Do you think that the Republicans in Congress, assuming we hold the House, can move far and fast? They did not do so in 2017, but Donald Trump and his team did not know then how to move far and fast in the congressional executive concert. Do you think they can do it this time?
Here's the problem. I don't think anybody's really coming to terms with how much oxygen tax code reform is going to suck out of the room in 2025. A lot of political capital needs to be reserved for reforming the entire tax code. And I think there are a lot more ideological divisions within the GOP today than there were in 2017 between the pro-growthers, the supply-siders, and populists who see the tax code as a vehicle for passive social change, which is not a conservative limited government philosophy. These are first principles, and they're going to come into conflict in 2017. And I think that will absorb a lot of political capital. And if they spend it on other things, if they spend it right away on, say, mass deportations, which is going to be controversial, then it's one of those things where you're not going to have it to expend on tax code reform. I hope the Republican Party gets its act together on tax code reform, starts retailing a couple of bullet points that everybody can get behind, and start prepping the battle space for this debate, because it will be an all-consuming debate. Everyone in America has an interest in the tax code. It will be a very high-level interest debate, and it will create fertile soil for Democrats to begin recultivating the coalition that it has lost. Republicans need to be
interesting.
Getting the space prepped.
You're not ambitious enough. Your ambition is right. They need to reform the tax code, but I want to use the spending clause. I want to go far and fast, and it requires a lot of negotiation right now before the 100 days begin.
They have a lot of political capital. I would just recommend husbanding it and identifying 2 or 3 big priorities where you want to spend it. If you start spending it willy-nilly on everything, that's what Democrats did at the beginning of Joe Biden's administration, and it cost them dearly. What happens is
that's true.
Administrations come in and they think they only have 2 years to get everything done before a backlash materializes, and they never stop to think that passion is what inspires the backlash. Set narrow goals and achieve them, and you won't alienate as many voters as you do if you're just trying to change the entire social contract.
Noah C. Rothman, senior writer at National Review. Thank you. Often a participant in the editors. I appreciate the editors podcast as well. I want to give you a little clue about what goes on when we're doing a show like this. As a service to my public, the people who like news with opinion and the two clearly delineated, I post a lot of YouTube videos at my YouTube channel, 4 or 5 a day. Sometimes 3, sometimes 6, but usually 4 or 5 a day. And I would encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. I'm stealing that from the Ruthless podcast. And it's different from my podcast, Highly Concentrated Hugh. It's just a series of clips from the show. For example, this morning's monologue and second segment, Harley combined into one video for YouTube to post under the heading, I don't know, I gave him a heading, The Red Tsunami and Its Aftermath, the wreckage of legacy media and polling. In that 2 segments, I used a clip from the Late Show, John Dickerson, talking for 45 seconds. And that's fair use. You can't take another network's product and run with it for 5 minutes. But I was commenting on, well, CBS issued an edict to YouTube that I was violating their proprietary right. And YouTube wants no part of that, and I understand that. So they took it down. So we recut it and put it back up. I want you to know they're so defensive about this because they have to be on defense because John's wrong. I'm right. The Constitution didn't change between Monday and Thursday. And John is always welcome here if he wants to come on and discuss it, not with a comic, but with a constitutional law professor. Happy to have that. I do want to go and check on the markets. There's an extraordinary story, and this story is always brought to you by AmericanFederal.com. They are our sponsor that sell and buy precious metals, especially gold. 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. Nick Rovich and his team, longtime sponsors of Dennis Prager's show, and I've long admired Nick because they're just a very straightforward group of people. Here's the cost of gold. Here's our commission. You want to sell us your gold. Here's what we'll discount the market spot price. It's so transparent and so honest and so quick. They don't sell you gold until your cash is in their hand. They don't play the float. They do tell you the commission up front. The more you buy, the less you pay in commission. And people want to buy gold. And especially in the last 2 years, they bought gold. Gold yesterday or this morning is trading at $2,671 an ounce. $2,671 an ounce. If you're buying gold from Nick Rovich and American Federal at 1-800-221-7694, I don't know what you're going to pay because it depends on when your money gets there. They don't take credit cards. That's the float. They don't take checks. They got to have the cash because they don't want to be part of somebody else's arbitrage. But when you get them the money, you can wait to decide when to pull the trigger, and you'll agree on the commission, and it'll all be very transparent. But gold dropped a little bit to 2,671 because the world's going to be more secure under Donald Trump. But the next 2.5 months are going to be very, very chilly. I mean, just spooky. The Dow yesterday, though, went up 1,500 points, 3.5%. The S&P went up 146 points, which is 2.55%. And the NASDAQ went up almost 3%, 544 points. And AmericanFederal.com sponsors that. Why did that happen? Because Trump's coming, the tax cuts are going to get extended, and the regulations are going to fall like trees in a clear cut. And amen. The American economy needs to thrive again. It needs to pulse with energy. It needs the regulatory state to retreat. God, I'm so relieved. We need growth. The world needs growth, and Donald Trump's going to deliver it. I want to speak for a moment about owning the libs. That's not what I mostly do. Occasionally, I will indulge in it a little bit. That's the job of Ruthless Podcast, Own the Libs. They're political professionals. I'm interested in moving the agenda forward, in preserving the constitutional order, helping find judges and people to staff the next administration. I want nothing from anyone. It's a great thing to not want a job. When you don't want a job, you just tell people what you think. So I am so happy Donald Trump won. And I have no interest in owning the left. But I want to point out it would be possible to do so. Not that we are not equipped to do so. Ben Rhodes is the Metternich of MSNBC, and he's sort of a forlorn and silly fellow because He fell into the Obama ambit, and he fancied himself a theorist without much training and holds forth. And he said a really silly thing on MSNBC. There's lots of silly things being said on MSNBC these days. Cut number 4.
I think, first of all, we have to understand the potency of any anti-incumbent message in the post-financial crisis political world and post-pandemic political world we're living in. It's not been a good time for incumbents. You referenced in your opening, Alex, that I do believe it's been challenging for Democrats that because we are oppositional to Trump, we defend the establishments in our own way that he is attacking. And those are the establishments that people are very angry at. Now, we can have a longer discussion about who's responsible for things like the financial crisis, who's responsible for the economic and trade policies that hollowed out the middle class in this country.
We're going back to the financial crisis now. Do you understand? The copium is big with this one. And instead of saying, what did we get wrong? And instead, they're saying the financial crisis traumatized the electorate and Trump is the result. It's crazy. It's crazy stuff. The Democrats were rejected because they were too radical. They left the mainstream. Sunny Hostin on The View. Second example, cut number 12.
I'm surprised at the result, but I'm not surprised. As a woman of color, I was so hopeful that a mixed race woman married to a Jewish guy could be elected president of this country. And I think that it had nothing to do with policy. I think this was a referendum of cultural resentment in this country.
Well, I think it...
Stop. Do you realize that Sunny is accusing the majority of American voters of being racist? She uses the term cultural resentment. Now, maybe she believes that, but seriously, did anyone out there vote for Donald Trump because Kamala Harris was a black woman of Asian descent and the second gentleman Jewish? Second gentleman is a very good friend of my friend, Ambassador O'Brien. I don't think my kind of conservative ever votes based on race, gender. We vote based on ability and position. But I don't think the left understands that. So it is tempting, so very tempting, to do nothing but own the trauma of the left and just exploit it and torture them with their own work. No, don't do that. Wasted effort. There is a transition underway, and people need to focus on that transition and focus on that 100 days. And if, God willing, the House majority is intact, there is a process called budget and reconciliation that allows laws to pass in the wake of a budget that support the spending and taxing provisions of the budget. It's a very complicated process, and it requires immediacy and focus and purpose. So I took to X last night. I've got a lot of things we need done. We need to expand the United States Navy right away. We need to extend the Trump tax code. We ought to condition federal aid to state school systems upon those state legislatures adopting or having adopted school choice, robust school choice, not pretend, not Band-Aids, but school choice like Arizona school choice. We absolutely need a whole bunch of things. I laid them out on X. Follow me on X. And follow me on YouTube so you get this. The key, and I'll talk with Senator Thune about this and every senator, is that Speaker Johnson, whoever is the next majority leader of the Senate, and President Trump and his designees sit down and agree, here's what we're going to pass in the first week. We are going to get it out of the House, then we're going to get it to the Senate. Tax and spend bills must originate with the House pursuant to the Constitution, and we are going to get that done, and it's going to be long, and it's going to be complicated. But our window is short on which to deliver, and we're going to deliver a Title IX rewrite that makes sure that boys do not play in girls' sports. We are going to deliver school choice. We are going to deliver the tax cut. We are going to expand the United States Navy. We're going to plus up the defense spending. That might be NDAA stuff, National Defense Authorization Act, but you can do some of it in the budget reconciliation process. We have a long way to travel. And the old phrase is stupid. You can go far alone or you can go a good distance together. No, you can go far in a hurry. FDR approved that. Joe Biden spent billions of dollars. I don't want to spend money. I want to reform things. There are some obvious Christmas tree ornaments I want. I want to defund NPR. I want to defund the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. I don't think PBS should get a dime. Right? There's some obvious things. I asked Boris Johnson last week. Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, I said, you guys were in power for almost a dozen years. How can BBC be so broken? How can it be so bad? He said, well, there's really no excuse. I'm paraphrasing. We lost sight of it. They did not resolve to act with immediacy and purpose to destroy those carbuncles on the body politic which ought not to be there. The federal system, our constitutional order, is one of limited and enumerated powers, and we ought to get out of many businesses. All right, we got to get out of it, and we've got to plus up some things besides defense. We have to plus up the Department of Civil Rights, the Department of Justice, Division of Civil Rights, so they go out and protect the First Amendment right and the rights against religious persecution of Jews on Ivy League campuses. We ought to tax the foundations, the endowments of these left-wing collections of academic extremists that are Harvard and Columbia and Penn, where they're torturing their Jewish students and have turned tenure into a system of systemic discrimination against ordinary norms. We've got to get our feet moving and our hands dirty with the legislation that can be done one time in every Congress. So you get two big swings, and this is all dependent on the House staying in Republican control. They have to pass a budget in the House. The budget must be adopted by the Senate or amended and sent back to the House, and it's got to be passed. And then you get to pass with simple majorities pursuant to the reconciliation process anything that is related to affecting that budget. So it is tax cut. It's the spending power for school choice. It's the expansion of the military. It is aid to our ally Israel. It is direction to the Department of Education that it combine with the Department of Health and Human Services and that it shrink. It is the repeal of the Civil Service Act of 1978, which is nothing but a bane upon the Republic, and only a former director, I want to be clear, acting director and deputy director. I was confirmed by the Senate as deputy director of the Office of Personnel Management in the Reagan years, but I served as its acting director after Director Horner departed. And only I know about, not only I am one of the few people who care about the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978 and the mischief it created. We've got to clean out the Department of Justice where the resistance is. And this is what I really want to tell you. The transition is a fun time in D.C. if you won. Right, so you get I want this job, I want that job, and I don't want any jobs. Right? I don't want to do anything. I want to stay right here telling you what's truthful. And I will be critical of the former president and future president when I am obliged to, as I have been in the past. I will be supportive when I'm obliged to. I don't have a dog in any fight about jobs. But I know one thing. I said it on Twitter last night. His vulnerability is the Department of Justice. Yesterday morning, I said Merrick Garland should direct Jack Smith to drop all of the indictments of President Trump that are federal. By late afternoon, that post had aged very well. Jack Smith abandoned it all because it's illegal to prosecute a sitting president. And it was all nonsense anyway. It was going to be thrown out by the Supreme Court eventually, clear away the wreckage. I hope President Trump pardons Hunter Biden. I hope he indicates that he will do so that Joe Biden is spared the indignity of doing so himself. And I am in the we are not enemies, we must be friends, Lincoln first inaugural. That's where I am. Time to look forward and fix the problems. We have big problems. The Chinese Communist Party and Xi, Putin, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, Cuba. We have got lots of spies in the United States. We have lots of terrorists in the United States. We have to build the wall. We have to fix the immigration system. I would push forward to grant regularization to the Dreamers. I would stand up a county-by-county system to regularize people who are in the country illegally, because if you got someone, say, a blue card, because they're law-abiding and they're hardworking and they've got evidence of having been here for many, many years and they've got a family. I don't want to deport them. I want to regularize them. They shouldn't vote. I think it's also possible that you condition federal spending to the states upon their fixing their election system, because everyone ought to be like Florida. They're done. It shouldn't be Nevada where, oh, this one's reporting, and Arizona is a mess. It's a mess. So you can use the spending power. It is legitimate to use the spending and tax power to condition the receipt of federal funds on reform like school choice. We should get a lot done in the first 100 days. We being people who believe in the Constitution, and that's me. And I think Donald Trump is not going to be interested in retribution. He's going to be interested in history and fixing things. He is a developer. He can go far and fast. J.D. Vance is a very smart Yale-trained lawyer. They're going to have great allies in the Senate. And they are going to be able to move. And Speaker Johnson is a great ally. So if they can't, don't dance on the graves of the left. They're so traumatized. Resilience is what we want. We want people who got knocked down get back up again like Donald Trump did, who got shot in the head and got back up again. We don't want revenge. We don't want to own the left. We want to make into law those reforms which we know are urgently needed to protect our families and our way of life, our freedom of exercise of religion, and our Constitution. Donald Trump is the resilience embodied in this song, and I'm joined by former Senator Jim Talent. I am amazed that he can get shot in the head, he can get impeached twice, he can get weaponized law targeted on him, and he wins a shattering. Jim Talent, what is your reaction to this epical moment in American politics?
Yeah, I thought about it also on a personal level. I mean, the energy, you mentioned it, resilience, the courage, and the confidence that President Trump displayed, not just through the campaign, but over the course of the last 4 years, really is remarkable. I mean, he has enormous strengths as a candidate and a leader. He also has weaknesses, as we all do, but he has enormous strengths. And his opponents have consistently underestimated him because they believe their own propaganda about him. And that's always a mistake in politics, in war, or in life.
Now, Senator, I have a very important question. How fast and how far, assuming that the House majority holds, can the budget reconciliation process take the Republic?
I think pretty fast. I heard your interview with Noah, and it was one of the rare occasions when I think I disagree with them. And I went through the list in my mind of what they need to do. It's not going to be easy, but most of it is relatively simple. I mean, I think Trump will reimpose the policies he had on the border. I think he's going to be able to get the money for the wall now. I mean, the Democrats can hardly oppose it since Harris said they were in favor of it. I think he'll get the border secure. I think they'll begin deporting, and they're going to start with the dangerous criminal elements, which is where they should start. The gangs, the drug traffickers, the sex traffickers, the Chinese agents, all those people. They have a reconciliation bill to pass, but I know for a fact that they've been working on that in the Ways and Means Committee in the House for 2 years. There'll be some discrete issues within the Republican caucus, like over the SALT deduction. Trump is immediately going to begin hacking away at regulations. And you remember the Small Business Regulatory Relief and Fairness Act, which permits Congress, without a filibuster, to overturn regulations that are, I believe it's 60 business days
180
or less
days
old. So
180 days.
I believe, is it? Yes. You know what? I helped pass that law, and I don't exactly remember it. But the point is, the things that Biden does going out the door, they're going to be able to reverse if they control the House. And they did that at the beginning of the last Trump administration. You'll see foreign policy, obviously, I think, change pretty quickly in the Middle East. I think Trump's going to get to work on Ukraine. So, yeah, there are going to be difficulties and there'll be squabbles within the Republican conference. But I expect a lot to happen. I don't think we should expect them to get it all done in 100 days. But I think by the August recess, you're going to see a lot of this done or well advanced.
We can't take that long. Yeah, I really don't think we can take that long. People's time frames are such in the modern. They've got to pass something big, right away, and it can't be spending. Senator, let me ask you a little bit about the very small thing. We are coming up on our 250th birthday. I hope Donald Trump's first executive order is to stand up the commission to celebrate that. He also gets to preside over the Olympics in LA in 2028, which is kind of fun. But do you think he'll pay attention to small symbolic things like the 250th birthday?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think he's going to have. This is an advantage we're going to have because he's had a long time to think about how he can improve the internal workings of his administration, and so I think important items like that, they're important from a symbolic purpose. I think they're going to pick that up, and I think it's an outstanding operation or an outstanding task that can be used to try and draw the country together. So, look, it's not necessarily what he's going to do in the first hour, but yeah, I mean, and Trump is a good showman. He understands the value of this kind of thing. So yeah, and I think it's a great idea.
All people remember
You
about
and I-
Jerry Ford is presiding over the bicentennial, and people need to realize it's going to be a big deal in 2026. Quick last question, Jim. I think the biggest vulnerability to Donald Trump is the Department of Justice. Mike Pompeo may never speak to me again because I said he ought to be the attorney general because you got to be tough, you got to be smart, you got to clean house, and you've got to stand up to people who want to use, as happened to Trump in the first term, the DOJ to cripple him. Do you think he's going to find an attorney general as smart as Barr, as tough as Pompeo to go over there and do that?
Yeah, I think yes, I have confidence he will, but I agree with you that it's a vitally important task, and it will be a difficult one because, as we have seen and we've talked about in this program and others, we have the DOJ's been politicized, the bureau's been compromised.
Yes,
I was like you. I was very reluctant to recognize that. I mean, I resisted it. I didn't want to believe it, but it's true. And so we have to have a Department of Justice and an FBI that follow the law. And to do that, he's going to need a really good attorney general. There's a lot of people out there. I think it needs somebody he needs to have a close working relationship with, but who's recognized by the legal community as a real leader.
Stature and brains. Because, I mean, there are a dozen assistant attorney generals. There's the deputy attorney general, associate attorney general. There are U.S. attorneys. The FBI is its own kingdom. Stature and brains for the AG, because that's where the Trojan horse can be in the Department of Justice. Jim Talent on X, at Jim Talent. Always a pleasure, Senator. Joined by the GOP whip in the United States Senate, Senator John Thune from South Dakota. Congratulations, Senator Thune. I knew you threw your back into it. You're out there with Bernie Moreno and Dave McCormick and many others. You didn't lose one seat. Congratulations. How you feeling?
Good, thanks, you. And it was a big night, obviously led by a big win for President Trump at the top of the ticket. And I think what you saw is the Republican coalition grew around the country as Americans of all stripes banded together and really came together to say enough is enough. We're tired of the failed Biden, Harris, Schumer agenda. And if you look at the numbers, we gained ground in 48 states, nearly every demographic compared to the 2020 election. Improved our margins in more than 2,300 countries across our counties, I should say, across the country. So it truly was a big night, and we're excited about a majority in the Senate and hopefully a majority in the House and what we can do with it.
I am so happy about Bernie Moreno because I'm a Buckeye. But Tim Sheehy, I know you were out there with him because he's close. I know you helped Deb Fischer hold off a late charge. I know that you were working for Dave McCormick. By the way, is Dave McCormick safe? Is that victory in the bag?
I think it is. In case he just needs to step aside and concede that race. And I hope at some point the media calls it. If you look at where the numbers are coming from, what they've got left to count, we feel really confident about Dave McCormick. And
I haven't given up on Kerry Lake or Sam Brown yet. I just want to focus on what is possible and what got done. We didn't lose a single Republican, right? Rick Scott,
That's
Ted
right.
Cruz, they were all under Deb Fischer. Not one went down.
And all ended up winning by substantial margins. Many of them were close races, but Rick Scott came up big in Florida. Ted ended up winning by 12 points in Texas, and Deb ended up winning by about over 7 points in Nebraska. So, on the main, Hugh, I think it was a resounding and convincing message to the American people and pretty much all across the country.
Now, Senator, what really concerns me, the filibuster is safe at least for a while. In fact, the Democrats are going to drop that stuff because I don't want the filibuster to go away. But I do worry about the 100 days. Joe Biden just spent money, and money just gave inflation. Can we get real stuff done in the first 100 days, like extending the tax cut, securing the border, school choice, things like that?
Well, that it makes a huge difference on what happens in the House. As you know, Hugh, if we have unified control of the government, if we have the House, Senate, and White House, we can use a legislative vehicle called budget reconciliation, and we can do a lot of the things you're talking about. And obviously, the first and foremost is extending the Trump tax cuts, which if we don't do that, ends up being almost a $2,000 tax increase for everybody, all families across the country. Not to mention the impact that it would have on the economy, on business, if the taxes go up by $4 trillion. But then you've got energy issues, you got border issues. There are so many things that we can potentially, of course, address. No, not obviously the limitations and how you can use that in the Senate, but that would be huge. And we have to make the most of those first 100 days, first 6 months, because we've got a narrow window here to get a lot done for the country. And boy, winning the House would give us a huge opportunity to do that. So I'm hoping that these last House races come in for us.
If that does, I want to lobby you now, Senator, to finish the wall and also to regularize the Dreamers at the same time. Because I know Dreamers upset some people, but Lincoln is our party's first president, and he was with malice towards none, with charity towards all kind of guy. Let me ask you about nominations. The president-elect is going to have a lot more experience this time, and he's going to have a slate. How quickly can those move through, get into position, and start, especially in the national security jobs? We've got to get people there.
We do, and that's why we've already, there have been conversations with his transition team, getting names up quickly so we can start vetting them quickly. Hopefully they're people who have already experience so that that vetting process can go more quickly. But yeah, as soon as we get the majority, which should be January 3rd, we got to get on the floor and start moving them. The challenge is, again, the 15 top positions in our government are 30 hours on the Senate floor. We don't expect the Democrats to cooperate with us in any way. It would be nice if on the key national security ones, on defense and state, CIA, and some of those they would. And hopefully we'll find a little bit of that on some of those key positions that need to get filled. But we got to move quickly, and that's the challenge because as you mentioned, we got, if you want to get a lot done legislatively in the first 100 days, the Senate also is in the personnel business, and some of these, just by virtue of the rules of the Senate, take a lot of time, particularly if you don't have cooperation from the Democrats.
Do you have a word for Governor DeWine on the sort of skill set that he ought to be seeking for a replacement for Senator, now Vice President-elect Vance?
I haven't talked to him this week, but I know that I did catch up with him. It's been a while now, but as we were thinking through this, and I hope that I know the Trump transition team needs to be in contact with him, and obviously we've got to get somebody named in your home state that not only is somebody who's going to be a solid principled conservative who wants to get things done, but also somebody that could win the re-election because he'll have to run in a special election here in a couple of years. So if you're available for that nomination, Hugh, let me know.
No. I don't want any jobs. It's the greatest thing in the world. I am the rarest thing inside the Beltway. I don't want anything from the transition. I don't want to go to the inauguration. I want nothing. Senator, let me ask you, though, about the Senate GOP. You've been led for so long by Leader McConnell. He's such a giant. He saved the Constitution with the no hearings, no votes policy when Justice Scalia died. Can the Senate, you'll have a leadership election. It will be hard fought. After it's all over, will it coalesce? Will the GOP coalesce in the Senate to work with Speaker Johnson if he holds the majority to get things done?
Yeah, we have to. There are just no ifs, ands, and buts about it. And I think the one thing, at least I certainly hope in the Senate, that when this is all said and done, everybody recognizes what a narrow window this could be. I mean, 2 years is another election, and who knows who's going to be in charge of the majority. So we have to really move quickly, move decisively, and try and get as much of an agenda through as we possibly can. And I think that happens in the Senate, irrespective of how the leadership election comes out next week. Obviously, I hope it works in my direction, but we're going to, in any case, if we can get a House majority, we want to work with President Trump to move an agenda that we have really a fairly, I would say, rare opportunity historically to do. And there's a lot to get done, as you know.
Now, Senator, we have 20 Republicans defending seats in the next cycle. It's the first cycle, the first election after a presidential win is really tough for the incumbent party. We got great people like Tom Tillis, et cetera, but you're going to have to find someone to run the NRSC again. I'd love to have Steve Daines do it again, but who do you think wants that job?
Well, I know somebody that does, and who would be great. But you're right, Steve Daines, man, what big shoes to fill. That guy he crushed it.
Oh my gosh,
and,
yes.
He's up in 2026. He's got to run for re-election in Montana, which it doesn't entirely preclude somebody from doing it again, but makes it a little bit more challenging. And I think he's he did his duty this time, but we're going to have our work cut out for us in 26. We've got a tough map, very different than this year, and we're going to need the right person in the job. But I think we've got somebody that could be really good at that, and I don't want to share that yet.
No, that's fine. Just so long as they're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Let me close with this. In terms of the president-elect, do you think he's going to tap any of your people on? I mean, we need an attorney general, and Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley and Mike Lee are all brilliant lawyers. Is he going to deplete your ranks by asking someone to come serve in the Senate? Maybe you could take a Democrat and put him in the cabinet and get a Republican governor to add some reinforcements?
Well, and we've talked about that with the transition team, and I know they're thinking through too just how many vacancies we can actually tolerate in the Senate, and we've got some really, really talented people who would make great Trump administration officials in what I think are some really key positions. But if they go very deep, then it creates challenges. Then you got to get the right people appointed by the governors. They got to run right away, and so that has its own set of challenges as well. I know that there are, as you mentioned, there's some great ones, and there's some really good spots where they would fit. But I know that's a factor that the administrator or the Trump folks transition team is taking into consideration as they think through some of these key positions.
Last question, Senator. The realignment. Half of Hispanic males voted for the president. A quarter of Black American men voted for the president. Is the conference briefed on this and the incredible implications of the realignment that happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have a lot more conversations about that as we kind of do the after action plan on this, Hugh. But it was a truly stunning American election if you look at where the votes came from in this country. And obviously speaks incredibly well of President Trump and his appeal to ordinary Americans, working class Americans, people who get up every day and do the work. And he's not somebody who necessarily appeals to the elites, but he brought a big coalition with him, and we need to continue to grow and build it because politics is about addition.
Amen. Politics is about addition. Senator John Thune from South Dakota, thank you. Time to get everyone a little bit off of politics, just a touch. One of the things that I want to remind people is that there's only one undefeated team in the National Basketball Association, it's the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they won last night in New Orleans, and they're 9-0. I just want to let them know. That's their slogan, let them know. And I'm so grateful for sports because it's common ground for left and right. It's common ground for everyone in Northeastern Ohio. Browns are kind of a disaster, but resilience is the name of the game, right? Resilience is what Donald Trump embodies. Talking with a good friend, a coach this morning about resilience, something you can't teach, something you live, something you have to experience. Everybody gets knocked on their rear end repeatedly. Richard Nixon was my second boss out of college. I went to work for David Eisenhower. Then I went to work for Richard Nixon in the Elba of America, San Clemente, as an editorial assistant on the book The Real War. And I spent a lot of time with the former president. I was honored when he asked me to oversee the construction of his library 8 years later after the Nixon Library got underway in Yorba Linda. Left the Reagan administration after it ended and went out there. And RN taught me a lot about get up. Get up. You get knocked down in 1960, you get up. You get knocked down in 1962, you get up. You get knocked down in 1974, you get up. And you make a plan and you move forward. The only person who is remotely close to winning the Resilience Olympics along with Richard Nixon is now Donald J. Trump. And that's because Richard Nixon wasn't shot in the head. Weaponization of the justice system very much happened. And my friend Jeff Shepard has put the word out there about, we're beginning to find out what happened in Watergate, and it's not pretty for the DOJ or the special counsel. And we will learn that as we go along. But nothing compares to getting shot in the head and standing up and saying, fight, fight, fight. And then the barrage of just absolute nonsense that came at him from Letitia James, from the crazy Alvin Bragg, and bad judges in New York, the show trial in in Georgia, the show trial in Arizona. Yesterday, Jack Smith gave it up. God bless you, somebody who spoke to him truly. You do not prosecute now. I had posted that early in the morning. Merrick Garland, tell him to stand down, and he did. He dismissed all the indictments. It's all done. And everybody else should do so. AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. The markets are going to be unsettled, but the country's going to grow. Country's going to boom. Country's going to boom. Home building's going to boom. Everything's going to boom. And we're going to clear out the regulatory underbrush. And you might want to buy a house, and you might want to move to a red state. Gary Sinise back to the program, a friend of the program for many years. Gary, it's good to see you. It has been a long time. And while the rest of us spent a year doing with politics, you had to deal with the loss of your son, and you did that by bringing his music to the public, and your part 2 is coming out now. Let's assume our new affiliates have no idea what we're talking about, Gary. Tell them what we're doing here.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Hugh, and featuring some of the music. My son, Max Sinise, had a very, very serious and rare cancer that he fought for about 5.5 years, and he passed away January 5th of this year. Right before he died, one of the last things he did was, he was a musician, and because of the cancer fight, he had to kind of tuck that away, and he wasn't able to play drums anymore, and he was disabled by the cancer. But early last year, he said to me, "Dad, there was a piece of music that I wrote in college that I never finished, and I think I'd like to finish it." And that was a piece called Arctic Circles, and that began an entire album's worth of music that came out earlier this year. Mac finished it, just weeks before he passed away, with a buddy of his, Oliver Schnee, and they together put this album together called Resurrection and Revival, Max Sinise, Resurrection and Revival. It came out earlier this year. As Mac wanted, the proceeds from that record all go to the Gary Sinise Foundation to help our veterans. And then after he passed away, I started looking through his files, and I found all kinds of additional music that he had written. And not wanting to leave that on his Dropbox file or on his laptop, I called up Oliver and I said, "I think we have another project here. I want to do another record, a part 2 of Resurrection and Revival." And we've done that. It's a double album of music that Mac wrote. Some of it he composed all the way back to college days. And the piece that you were showing there is called Waltz for Addicts. That is a piece that he wrote in college, his final year of college. It's a music video there that lives on Max Sinise YouTube. And it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. He actually wrote it right before he wrote Arctic Circles. So both those pieces are just
Gary,
beautiful.
I want people to understand. I am afraid of very few things. I am afraid of losing a child or a grandchild. I think it would break me. And I have watched you this year purpose your grief into the foundation and the memory of Mac and the music. And I know people have had lost children before. It's so hard the first year. It's going to be your first Christmas without Mac, right? It's going to be your first New Year's without Mac. How hard has this been, and how did you do it?
Well, managing the emotions is, it's a daily a daily challenge. I think, for me, Hugh, the fact that Mac left all this music it was somewhat of a gift. It was like finding a treasure box of beautiful music, and it's given me this sort of project to work on, in his honor and in his memory. I've been spending, this entire year working on this to bring this to life. There are 19 compositions on the record. And, I wish that he was here to witness the fact that his music was coming to life in this way. There are music videos that we've made of the recording sessions that we had this past summer of some of the music. There's even buddies of Mac that I brought out from USC. He'd gone to USC with a bunch of pals. He was in the music program at USC, had a bunch of pals in that program, and I asked them to come out and actually play on one of the songs that is on this new record. It's actually the last song that Mac wrote last year in his hospital bed. He continued to try to persevere through all these challenges, and it was very, very difficult. And of course, it's very difficult to, just missing him daily and by the minute. But now we get to share this beautiful legacy of music that he left.
You're kind of working with him after he's gone, and that's a very unusual opportunity, but it's also an unusual difficulty. And has that been better for you or harder for you to get to work with him as you grieve?
Well, I found a lot of this music, Hugh, and I had heard some of it, but there were a bunch of compositions that I hadn't heard before. He just wrote them and he tucked them away in his files. And so, of course, when I'm discovering this music, I wish that I had known about it so that I could ask him about certain compositions, where they were coming from, where the ideas came from, where the titles of the music came from. There's one piece he wrote in college called Angel's Theme. And we had a little puppy named Angel. He was close with this little puppy, and Angel was, attacked by a coyote in Calabasas, California, and we lost the dog. I wonder if Angel's Theme was written with the little puppy in mind. I don't know. I wished I could have asked Mac these questions, but yeah, I feel like he's right on my shoulder. And thankfully, he had a buddy, Oliver Schnee, who he worked with on the first record, and I engaged Oliver to come in and work on the second record as well. And he's helped develop some of the music, expand some of the orchestral compositions that Mac had written for my foundation. It's just given me a lot to do this year, and I really needed that. So thank you, Mac, for leaving me this music to discover and then to bring out and share with the world. And of course, as the proceeds from the first album, the vinyl, go to the Gary Sinise Foundation, we're going to do that with the second one. He designed the cover. He designed the back cover. We're keeping all those designs, and all we're doing on the front cover of the vinyl for the second record is putting Resurrection and Revival Part 2.
Who is part of his band? I know Oliver Schnee and his story. You and I have talked about Young Mr. Hayes and the connection, but who's part of the band?
Well, the final song that Mac wrote, and the video for that song is called Quasi Love. I know the pronunciation is quasi, but Mac, I found this voice memo in his phone when I started looking through his phone and his iPad and all these things. And I found this music that he'd written, and I found him singing into the voice memo on his iPhone the melody for this song. And he wanted to call it Quasi, not Quasi. So it's Quasi Love. And I brought all these buddies out that he had played with in high school, his guitar player, first band in high school. Jake Hayes was a buddy that, Robert Hayes and I are friends, and we introduced our sons together, and they went to work together. Mac was an excellent drummer, and Jake is a great guitar player and a singer and a songwriter, and they started writing songs together. I brought Jake out to be a part of this, and I asked his drumming roommates. He had a room full of drummers that all stayed together. It was Mac and 3 other drummers. I brought them all out, so they're all on the record. And also the gal who actually wrote the screenplay for the movie that was made after Mac wrote Waltz for Addicts. That inspired an animated short that they did in their final year at college. It lives on the YouTube channel, Mac Sinise YouTube, called Luna and Lars. And I brought Leah Woodward out as well. She wrote the script for that. They were very good friends. So having them there as a part of it was just, I mean, it was incredible to have all his pals be a part of this new record.
I'm sure they loved it, but it's a wonderful thing. I want the audience to know about the Gary Sinise Foundation. New listeners, they don't know how long you've been at this. You've been at this since we went to war after 9/11, and you've purposed the Lieutenant Dan Band to serve our troops everywhere. We're still at war. I mean, American troops are still under fire, and our wounded still need help. How goes the foundation, Gary Sinise?
The foundation's in its 14th year now. I launched it in 2011 after, several decades of working with our veterans. But after September 11th, I just went full on, supporting a lot of other military charities and veteran charities, first responder organizations. And then in 2011, launched the Gary Sinise Foundation. We've raised over $500 million in the last 14 years and deployed that to multiple programs, helping people, helping our Gold Star families, the families of our fallen, helping our first responders, providing entertainment, building homes for our wounded. We do all kinds of things at the Gary Sinise Foundation because that's kind of what I was doing before I had the foundation. I was supporting in multiple ways, and just wanted to give back to those who were serving our country post 9/11. I had been working with Vietnam veterans going back to the 80s. And then after Forrest Gump, I started working with our disabled veterans because I played the wounded veteran, Lieutenant Dan. And then the turning point for me into a full-on mission of action was September 11, 2001, and what happened to us on that day. And that's turned into a multi-program organization that is operating full speed all the time. You can learn about it at GarySiniseFoundation.org. There's a great story about Mac there. He worked for the foundation when in 2017 he came to work for the foundation. 2018, unfortunately, he was diagnosed with cancer. And by the end of 2019, he was unable to continue. But one of the things he did, Hugh, if I could mention, is right before he was unable to continue with the foundation, he launched a podcast for the Gary Sinise Foundation, 2 audio podcasts, one with our videographer, Kip Perry, who's followed me around for years, and then one audio podcast with me. And then the challenge of fighting cancer became too difficult for him to continue. But after he died, we decided to resurrect that podcast in his honor. And that is right there on the Gary Sinise Foundation website. We built a studio for him, and it's just beautiful to be able to honor Mac that way.
I have put out on my X the link to the Gary Sinise Foundation explanation of Resurrection and Bible Part 2. Remember, all proceeds from this go back to the foundation which serve our veterans. Thank you, Gary. God bless you and your family and the memory of Mac. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about it. Jim Garrity of National Review and the Washington Post joins me. Jim, I want to appreciate the editors for getting a podcast out yesterday. I kind of listened to it, but I was staggering around when it played and I fell asleep, so I got to listen to it again. Collect for me your thoughts now that we are 36 hours after the tsunami and the wreckage on the beach is mostly legacy media and the pollsters.
First of all, Hugh, if you fell asleep, was that because I wasn't on the podcast? And this is your subtle shot
have no
at my
idea.
colleague?
I can't remember the podcast. I know I turned it on and I fell asleep. Okay. I was so exhausted.
I actually was not on that one. I did tape a 3 martini lunch and another one for later in the week with Greg. But like all of us were up till like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. So everybody was dragging. I also want to thank the excellent publisher of National Review for choosing to have a lunch meeting yesterday.
What? Are they out of their...
But we all showed up, by the way. We're all dragging, but generally good spirits. I think, even if you're never Trump like myself, you woke up Wednesday morning and realized Kamala Harris is never going to be president of the United States. And there's going to be a Republican Senate, and it really looks like there's going to be a Republican House, maybe even a slightly expanded Republican House by a couple of seats.
Well, what's the deal on that? What's the news on that? Because I can't make heads nor tails out of the majority.
Yeah, so it looks like, by my count, there's like 3 that the Republicans have picked up, 2 that Democrats have picked up. Nobody's said a lot of, oh wow, this one really jeopardizes Republican House. But I too, my ability to do math is really not great when I'm operating on minimal sleep, and that's what everybody's been doing since election night. Like, the word from Republicans is they expect to have control of the House. You can tell from the body language of Mike Johnson, he fully expects to remain being Speaker. A good point by my colleagues in the corner pointing out, I suspect, look, the House is never going to be easy to run, and we're certainly not in the range where you have a large enough majority where Mike Johnson's job is going to be easy. But with Trump in the White House, as the odds of huge Republican infighting are lessened, not eliminated. I mean, there are going to be disagreements, but the idea of their, once Trump says, "Hey, I really want this bill passed," you're going to see most House Republicans fall in line and say, "Okay, let's get this bill passed," or maybe we can make 1 or 2 tweaks and get to 218.
Now, Jim, you mentioned it, so I want to ask you. You're never Trump, and you've never been shy about that. But your analysis has never been impacted by that. Are you going to be able to call balls and strikes on success? I am. I'm Trump skeptical, and I'm here to tell you, if he does something, if he puts a tariff on Canada on maple syrup, I'm going to be denouncing it. And if he doesn't
10%.
do the Navy buildup, I'm going to be saying where. Do you think you can get to the objectivity that you've always had for the second term?
Yeah. By the way, I can hear Hugh Hewitt listeners screaming at their radios right now, saying that Jim is a never Trump SOB. He's never been objective. If you want to say I've never been objective, fine. Objective means you don't have opinions about that which you're covering. I've always tried to be fair. I've always tried to be,
yes.
And when Trump was president, when he did something I liked, I gave him an attaboy. The defense buildup, the tax cuts, the judicial nominations, right to try, criminal justice reform. I could find a lot of stuff in the Trump administration's policies that I liked. And each time they did it, I said, hey, you know what? Good for you, Mr. President. Good for you, Republicans. This is going to move the country in the right direction. When Trump did stuff I didn't like, January 6th, Stop the Steal, all the bombast, all of the stupid fights he got into, all the number of times he would jump on Twitter or Truth Social and rant about what was said on him on cable news. I just don't think the president of the United States should be losing sleep over what Mika Brzezinski said.
But Jim, my question isn't that. My question is, you've avoided the trap of sunk costs. Some never Trumpers will never get out of that deep mine. Do you think they will? I mean, it's a pretty massive applause for him, and the resilience is remarkable. And Jack Smith gave up yesterday.
One of the things I've wanted to see, like one of my gripes with Trump, or one of the frustrating consequences of Trump, is the effect he had on his opponents and the degree to which they believe, well, he's Satan, therefore we can do whatever we need to do in order to beat him. Whether that's in lawfare, whether that's in, comparing him to Hitler, whether that's, all that kind of stuff. So I
shooting him.
Yeah, there's
shooting
that.
Him.
Don't do that, America. Stop shooting at presidential candidates. But the idea that you can, okay, this has been such a rebuke of the Democratic Party, such a rebuke of whatever term you prefer to use, wokeism, progressivism, hard left liberalism, however you want to characterize it, that this has been a terrible mistake for the country. The consequences in immigration policy have been bad. The consequences in crime have been bad. Consequences for the economy have been bad. Inflation, consequences around the world have been bad. Right? And we're starting to hear it in these coming days. Hey, Joe Biden was a really bad president. Hey, Kamala Harris was not a good vice president. In fact, she probably wasn't that good a presidential candidate either. Although keep an eye, she's probably still going to end up with the third or fourth most votes of all time. But we'll discuss that another time. The idea that maybe you have to recognize the country is not what you thought it was, and
Amen.
A president you don't like is capable of doing things you do like. And I think if you have I think Kirsten Gillibrand proudly said she voted against every nominee, including James Mattis.
Yeah. That is very well put. People you don't like can do things you do like. And please, to the Never Trump world, Jim doesn't do this, but this is for the other Never Trumpers out there. You don't have to declare your priors in every column and every appearance. You really don't have to. You don't. Look forward like Jim does. Thank you, Jim Garrity. Follow him on X at Jim Garrity. Read him in the National Review and the Washington Post.